Welcome to Crushgasm, the podcast dedicated to the highs and lows of crushes. From their first to their worst, we're going to cover them all with a cascade of characters, including our guest today, a girl who snuck into Warped Tour a handful of times because money was hard to find after college. Me. Yes, I'm running solo into the pit this week to pay homage to a summertime tradition that is no more for the emo kids out there around the world, and that is Warped Tour. But before I get into the fond memories of standing outside at 11 a.m. with an egg roll in hand, I do want to mention that Crushgasm is a proud member of the I Did Not Make These Rankings podcast network, alongside An Evening at the Movies for all your cinematic needs, Crime Rewind for those who want to take a closer look at some cold cases, Literature Reapers for all the bookworms, Love is Black, where a love story is unfolding right before our ears this season, as well as Men of the Prize for those who enjoy unforgettable conversations. Also, Masturbators, a show that has you covered with amazing brackets and drafts, and last but certainly not least, The Simplest, a podcast that counts down top 5 favorites and pairs nicely with a glass of wine. So check out any and all of those lovely podcasts wherever you prefer to listen up. Now let's talk about Warped Tour. It'd be wild to say I'd gone for decades, but in reality, this summer festival that brought together everything from pop punk to screamo to even some hip hop here and there, it started way back when in 1995. I was 8 years old that year and a little too preoccupied with trying to figure out 3 things: how to start a successful babysitter's club, where to get knee highs like Cher and Clueless, and just how to make Devin Sawa fall in love with me. It'd be another decade before I was able to attend the first Warped Tour of my life, and I'd say it was well worth the wait, and that I would have likely died had I been let loose there at like 15 years old. Plus, I don't think my heart could have handled seeing Good Charlotte at that time. In reality, I wasn't prepared to go at 18 either. My biggest regret of that day will forever be the decision to wear pants to the Pomona date. Those unfamiliar with where that is, it's in Southern California, and I want to say it was like June or July, so it was hot as hell and I wanted to pass out, but I did push through because bands like the All-American Rejects were there and I wanted to swing my little heart out. But my main event of that day was Fall Out Boy. Shout out to Candace and I think Christina, I think she was there, for sitting in the parking lot during Fall Out Boy's set. They were ready to head out, but me and my BFF Loretta, we told them we were stuck in the middle of the crowd and had no way of getting out. Sorry ladies for their lies, but at the time, like, it was Fall Out Boy, what we're gonna do. Which, at that time, they were my end-all be-all. Today, well, admittedly, it's been a minute since I've heard anything new from them, but I wish them well. Now, since this is about Warped Tour and I kicked off my I have no plans after college, so I guess I'm gonna write lifestyle with a music blog called Golden Mixtape, I thought every so often during this episode I'd take a quick break and share a mixtape. And this one's dedicated not only to Fall Out Boy, but all the friends I made standing in line for them following that initial set at Warped Tour. So every mixtape's gonna have 5 songs, so let's get started. The first one, I kind of went in just order of the albums of the releases, and I threw a song in I listened to all the time but had forgotten about. So now it's back in rotation, but first up, Calm Before the Storm, followed by Sophomore Slump or Comeback of the Year, then the song that walks so Paramore is still into you could run, Hum Hallelujah, and really one of the last jams I remember liking from Fall Out Boy, Tiffany Blues. And rounding it all out, we have this forgotten acoustic marvel, It's Not a Side Effect of the Cocaine, I am thinking it must be love. So now it's time to move on from my first Warped Tour because it was far from my last. I may have gone to at least one every year over the next decade, but I do think in all honesty there was at least 1 year or 2 where I did skip because the lineup was a little questionable. In hindsight though, Warped was a great summer tradition, not only because of the array of bands you were going to get to see, but also it was like this little weird reunion of people you saw here and there throughout the previous year at other shows, and you were basically just hanging out with your friends all day. And if I had to boil down my favorite things about this silly shoe sponsored festival, that would be in my top 3. I loved getting up really early, grabbing a sausage McGriddle, and then spending the day bitching and moaning with my friends while Simple Plan reminded us that life, it is a nightmare. Plus, if you don't know, my favorite part of any concert is when the music stops and the crowd continues to sing in unison. I don't know if magic exists, but that always feels pretty freaking magical, because in the sea of people, there are endless reasons why they are singing at the top of their lungs alongside you at that moment. It could be the same reason as you or far from it, but that song means something to everyone, and that's, I think, pretty cool. So some of my favorite songs to hear sung in this magical way at Warped Tour. Let's see. This time for another mixtape, but this was harder than the Fall Out Boy one because it took my memory a little work, and I'm pushing 40. So here we go. First one that came to mind is A Boy Brushed Red Living in Black and White by Under Oath. I am in no way the biggest Under Oath fan or really a fan at all, but this song, I'd be walking around Warped Tour, hear them start this one and just stop, because I just love it so much, and I love the crowd during it even more. And next, the second song, there is a lot by Taking Back Sunday I could place here, but I think hearing thousands of people scream, "I got a bad feeling about this," is never not calming for some reason, so I gotta go with A Decade Under the Influence. The next song is one that I consider one of the greatest pop punk songs ever written, and that is Dear Maria, Count Me In by All Time Low. Because when they get to that breakdown towards the end, back in the day, you could have lost your life in that crowd of their rabid, overly hormonal teenagers. But thankfully, all I ever lost and recovered was a shoe. Next is Linkin Park, which they actually only ever played like one time back in 2014 with a surprise set that saw them bringing out people from other bands to live out their fanboy fantasies. It was very cute. Plus, Linkin Park is one of my top 10 favorite bands I've ever gotten to see live. So my favorite song that day that they sang was Bleed It Out with Machine Gun Kelly, but for the sake of this mixtape of songs that put me in my feels when the crowd sings along, I gotta go with One Step Closer, because for so many people my age, that song was such a moment. And I talked about that moment on the Notes Magoats podcast, so I won't elaborate too much because you could check out that episode and go and support my boys over there. But I will say, Linkin Park was to millennials what Nirvana was for Gen X, and I will die on that hill. And rounding this one out though, a Warped Tour staple. I don't know how many times New Found Glory's done it, but they're just one of the greats. They're on the Mount Rushmore of Warped Tour for me. And with that, I'm gonna go with Sincerely Me. And like I mentioned way back when this episode started, I did sneak into a lot of these shows because, well, did you not hear? I wound up a freelance writer, but I did manage to get a few press passes here and there too, and because of that, got to have some awesome interview moments and make some memories. I was writing for the now defunct Chicks with Guns magazine, and that was the first time I was sort of blessed with this opportunity to go backstage and talk to bands, but it was like being tossed to the wolves. I remember standing there with one of the guys from the Casualties. Do you know how cool and punk rock that band is? I was very intimidated. I do think my nerves got a little better as the years went on, and I talked to people from Soupy, from the Wonder Years, about Childish Gambino right before he sort of went to the next level with his music. I interviewed Fireworks in their tour RV, and we played Fuck, Marry, Kill with I think Ryan Gosling, Ryan Reynolds, and another Ryan that escapes me. Alex and Jack from All Time Low were so much fun to interview, and Jack really, I remember him liking my Power Rangers bag. Those were definitely the highlights of those days, but let's not forget, I'm never gonna forget the dude from Never Shout Never, who was kind of a diva, but mostly a dick. So we've talked Friends, Fall Out Boy, sing-alongs, press passes, and sneaking in, but in case you're wondering, we did get caught one time for sneaking in, and I was scared out of my life because I'm not the type of person who gets into trouble, ever. But at least we only had to donate some money and I think buy a ticket. I don't really remember, but man, I was really scared. But what sucked even more than getting caught sneaking into Warped Tour was when it was announced that Warped Tour would be no more. I don't know, it sort of felt like this thing that would never go away because while I may have been getting older, I just figured there were still going to be kids shopping at Hot Topics around the country who would want to go until the end of time, right? Well, not so right, because in 2018, that was it. Well, it did return the following year for its 25th anniversary, but I think it officially ended in 2018 because that was like the last full-length version. And I think I had one of the best moments at that final show that I got to go to. But before I get into that, one more mixtape featuring some songs from bands who played that official last Warped Tour in 2018, because again, 2019 don't count for me. And these aren't songs that I think they played there, I just think they're good songs by these bands, so we're going to kick this off with State Champ's cover of Matchbox 20's Real World. I hope and pray that one day this band is like, you know what, we're going to do an entire show of Matchbox 20 covers. That's my dream. Let's get that notice out to them and make it a reality. After that, we're going to have we'll call it one of the most white trash songs I've ever heard, but it's also a really good time, and that is 303's Don't Trust Me. Always a good time and a reminder of what a weird time the 2000s really were. Another one is Callin' All Cars by Census Fell, which could have been a bonus track on a crowd sing-along favorites mixtape. And I never really fucked with the ska aspect of Warped Tour, but it was there like a weird cousin you like to see at Thanksgiving, so let's show some love to Less Than Jake and the Science of Selling Yourself Short. And last on this one is Greener with the Scenery by The Used, and there's a story for that, because that one leads us back to the final Warped Tour. So after the boy band craze, I settled into bands like Good Charlotte, New Found Glory, but around 15 or 16, I heard The Used for the first time, and it was one of those musical moments you never forget in your life. And if I had to pinpoint the perfect soundtrack to my teen angst, it'd be their self-titled album. They immediately became my everything and remained so throughout high school. So fast forward to this final Warped Tour I'd ever be at. It was in Ventura, also known as one of the best states to go to because it's right by the beach, never too hot, and that's the best date. Ask anyone, they'll tell you. Anyways, back to The Used. They were the last band that was going to play that day. They were closing it out, and it kind of like my first, the people I came with were done, ready to leave, and they went out to the car. So sort of full circle moment in that regard, but also in this sense that this was sort of closing a chapter in my life in this weird symbolic way, because there I was standing alone as this band that pretty much defined my youth played at this festival that I'd spent so many years attached to for the last time. And of course, they ended with Taste of Ink, which, even though it is a single and probably their most notable song, it is forever my favorite of theirs. So it was really emotional for my inner 16-year-old self who is wearing that Invader Zim tee and rocking those flared jeans, because again, to see a band that was the foundation for your teenage rage be the last band you see at Warped Tour in your early 30s, it's something. A moment I shall never forget, along with so many others from a summer festival that may have cost too much and been too hot, but one I am really grateful to have been able to attend more than a few times in my life. Now, if you follow me on Twitter, you're probably like, girl, where's Paramore? Where are those Paramore stories, Paramore moments? Well, I was going back and forth on like what I wanted to talk about in this actual episode and what I wanted to say for the blogs this week. So on Monday, I wrote a thank you note to Kevin Lyman, the man who made Warped Tour a reality, alongside 1,000,001 other people who helped him from tour managers to caterers to event staff. And on Thursday, that's where I'm going to do my top 10 memorable moments. And I might have covered some of them in this episode. I don't know. We'll see. I'm recording this a long time before I'm writing those 10 down. So stay tuned to see what actually makes the cut. And with that, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me talk about my love of Warped Tour. And you can find all of Crushgasm's information below. And until next time, as always, keep crushing it.